Your sales process literally determines how every single one of your sales reps closes deals. And the problem is most sales teams have the crappiest sales process in the world because it sounds like run a discovery call, run a demo call, run a proposal call, run a vendor review call. But the problem is all of those things are so focused on what the seller's doing and they have nothing to do with the decisions that your buyer is making instead. So this is the fundamental difference between what we call a meeting-based sales process and a stage-based sales process. So we are going to walk through 3 things in this sales process module. Number 1 is what makes a good sales process and a crappy one. Number 2, what you should include in each stage of your sales process. And then lastly, number 3, we will walk through Mark's 5-stage sales process that he has used to close $250 million plus of revenue by himself, alone, with no help at all. Alrighty, so Mark, let's first talk about what is wrong with a meeting-based sales process. If my sales process looks like discovery, demo, multi-threading, proposal, vendor review, what is wrong with that?
I think there's 2 big problems with that. One is we're teaching reps to run from meeting to meeting rather than helping a buyer move closer to a decision. And the second thing that happens is we teach reps that you have to do something in a discrete meeting when they could actually be doing more than one thing in a single meeting once they get to the result of what they're trying to do.
So what would like an example of that be?
So an example of that would be if I have a discovery meeting and I do all my discovery in that meeting, and then I have a demo meeting, guess what? I don't do the demo in the discovery meeting. I don't do discovery in the demo meeting. And so they're 2 discrete things. But what happens if at the end of my discovery meeting, I haven't gotten everything I needed? Most reps will go ahead and schedule the demo anyway, because that's the next meeting you schedule, right? Instead of, you know what, I did my discovery and after 10 minutes, I know what's going on. I know what to show them. I'm gonna do the demo right now because I'm ready for it. And so we need to get people out of the mode of thinking of, I have to do a discrete thing in a meeting to, I just need to accomplish what I need to accomplish and then move forward from there.
And so what you talk about is not a meeting-based sales process, but a stage-based sales process. I'm gonna read off your 5.5 sales stages that you have. So your first sales stage is stage 0, which is meeting booked, which is did they book a meeting? Your first stage is problem agreement. Did they agree to a problem that they could solve? Second stage is priority agreement. Did they agree that this problem is worth prioritizing? Third stage is evaluation agreement. Have they agreed on how they plan to evaluate solutions to solve for that priority? Stage 4 is value agreement. Do they agree that you bring enough value to the table? And then stage number 5 is commercial agreement. Do they believe that it's worth the price? So break that down for me. Like, what's better about this?
It actually helps the buyer do what they need to do to move forward in making a buying decision. What we do as sellers doesn't matter. What matters is what the buyer does. But most sales processes, especially meeting-based ones, try to tell the seller to make sure that if you just do this, this, and this, then hopefully at the end of it, they'll decide to pick you. Versus a stage-based deal process, what it does is it allows you to say, what do we need to accomplish with the buyer so the buyer can move forward in their decision-making process versus us just moving forward in our sales process.
One big paradigm shift for me was when you talk about a good sales process is about what you're getting, not what you're doing. So to go back to that previous example, you're trying to get problem agreement. The way you can get problem agreement can be through a discovery call. You might also get problem agreement with the demo request when they're like, these are all the problems that I have. You might even get that before that call begins. The second step would be you're trying to get priority agreement. But the reality is you might be able to get priority agreement on that discovery call too. You might be able to get evaluation agreement on the discovery call. In other words, you might be able to combine 4, 5, or 6 meetings into one because a deal is hot and you can actually speed up a deal because the prospect is agreeing to the problem, priority, evaluation, and value in fewer calls versus if you forced yourself to be in a 5-meeting sales cycle, every single deal you had in your sales cycle would be a 5-call close, when in reality you could speed it up or you might need to slow it down.
Yeah, perfect example. At Outreach, we had an SMB segment that had 2 parts. It had a micro and then regular SMB. The micro segment, we were able to get that down to a 1-call close, 10 minutes of discovery, 10 minutes of demo, 10 minutes of negotiations, send the MSA. We compacted all of the agreements into a single call. But in our normal SMB deal, which was say almost 20K deal, we would have different meetings to do that. And we would still accomplish all those agreements, but they usually couldn't happen all in one meeting. When you do meeting-based sales process, your super tiny deals now have 5 meetings. They're now 5 weeks long. Our micro deals at Outreach were 7 days. That's it, 7 days. And that's because we truncated the agreements into a single meeting versus spreading them out over multiple meetings.
The other day I was coaching a seller on this process, and he was like, the next step that I have is I got to do a demo. And I was like, okay, that's what you have to do, but what are you trying to get? Let's go through our stages. What was the problem that they agreed that they had? And they're like, well, it sounded like they liked a lot of the things that we do at 30 Minutes to President's Club. And I was like, no, that's not a problem. How are we possibly going to do a demo for a problem that doesn't exist yet? I actually think what we need to do instead of a demo meeting is we need to do a little bit more discovery on our next call before we do a demo, because we need to get problem agreement before we can do a demo. So again, you want to think about the things that you're trying to get, not what you're trying to do. So we're going to go through each of those 5 agreements, and we're going to go through a couple of ingredients for each of those stages. The first agreement is the seminal question, which is what is the question that we're trying to answer or the agreement we're trying to get. Number 2 is the exit criteria. How do we know if we got the answer? Right? So like, I like 30 MPC is not good problem agreement. Number 3 is who are the people that need to be involved in each stage? And then number 4, what are the tools that I can use to get that exit criteria? In other words, what can I do to get problem agreement? So Mark, let's start with stage 1. Let's skip past meeting booked. Problem agreement. Walk me through the seminal question and exit criteria. Let's start there.
Yep. So for problem agreement, the seminal question is simply, do we have a problem here that we can solve? That's what we need to figure out. The way that we do that is with certain exit criteria. How do we prove that they have a problem we can solve? One is, can they confirm 2 or 3 business initiatives that are happening at the executive level that have real weight and importance? And the second one is do we understand the org structure? We use something called 3-2-1, 3 people in 2 departments. One of them is a decision maker. So if we understand the organization and we understand the business initiative, now we can trust that we found a problem that we can both agree that we can solve. The people involved in this level are usually director or plus. They have that insight into what's happening in the company. A manager won't have that insight. So we need to push up. So if you have an initial meeting with a manager, you might use that to fuel getting into meeting with a director to make sure that you get problem agreement. And then what are the tools that we use? We could use case studies. We can actually use a short discovery-based demo. We can use certain insights or certain customer referrals, right? Those are all things that we can use as tools in order to get back these org charts, these timelines, these type of business initiatives that they're after.
So could you give me an example of what a good business initiative or problem would be at Outreach?
Yeah. So at Outreach, a good business initiative would be, we are struggling to get pipeline coverage. Therefore, we are falling behind on our numbers and we don't have the deals in order to make up our gap.
Great. And what would an example of like a bad problem be?
A bad problem would be, we need to get better at outbound, right? See, that's big. It's nebulous. Why do you need to get better at outbound, right? Versus pipeline coverage, that's a specific thing that's on a slide, probably in a typical executive meeting happening once a week that everybody's eyes are on. No CFO sitting around saying, I wonder how our team feels about how they do outbound. What they're looking at is our outbound delivering the number that we need to have the pipeline coverage that the business requires?
One of the biggest mistakes I see in this stage is people think that wanting something is the same as having a problem. I want to do a lot of things. I want to have an automated email machine cannon that can send a lot of emails. The reason I want that thing is because I have a gap in my pipeline coverage. And a lot of times a good seller's job or a good manager's job is to pull and inspect and make sure that there's a big problem behind the want. Because a lot of times people will want something that is just a nice to have.
I think it's important for this stage to really define problem. A problem is a executive level business initiative where there is a gap between current performance and the performance that's needed to meet the needs of the business, right? People typically confuse preference, pain, and project with a business initiative. And what I mean by that is, well, we don't really like how we do outbound. Your CFO doesn't care if you like how you do outbound. They care, are you getting the results or not, right? Oh, you know what? Like, I have this little project. Well, guess what? A little project isn't going to get funded. We need to be part of a bigger business initiative. Oh, you know what? My SDRs really don't like to make cold calls. Your CFO doesn't care about that. They don't care about the pain of making cold calls. So we have to move from preference, pain, and project up into business initiative because that's what gets the money.
So I've got problem agreement, and then the next stage is to make sure that I have priority agreement. So walk me through those 4 things.
Yeah, a priority agreement means that, is this actually going to be big enough to solve? You know how most sellers get to the end of the deal, they've done really good, the buyer's really excited, and then you get deprioritized or other priorities kind of get your deal pushed to the side? That's because you didn't do this stage. You never agreed, is this actually a problem that needs to be solved now? So the question that we're asking is can we agree that this problem is big enough to solve now? The exit criteria is we have to have quantified business initiatives. We can't just know that they need pipeline coverage help. We need to know that they get 1.2x pipeline coverage, but they need 3x pipeline coverage. That shows a gap. The gap is what people buy to fill, right? Then the second other exit criteria is, do we know when they need this value by? That is a telltale sign of how important something is. If they don't need the value for a year, you're not going to close this deal in 30 days. We need to make sure that we create the urgency and help them understand why implementation is needed now, because every day that they wait is added cost of inaction, right? We got to decide when this is going to happen. If a seller doesn't know how to help a buyer do that, that's when your deal cycles start to really slip.
Great. So we talked about the seminal question, the exit criteria, the people involved. It looks like you still are mostly operating at the director or above level. What are some of the tools that I can use to figure out if this problem is a priority?
So these are tests, right? Like these tools are kind of tests. What you would say like at outreach would be like, hey, could we sit down with one of your SDRs, one of your SDR managers and look at their workflow and come back to you and show you what does their workflow look like now versus what it would look like with outreach? If they would say no to that, that would say to me, this isn't a priority because they won't even give me a rep's time, right? So that's what you want to do is you want to do like a workflow teardown. You might want to do like an ROI calculating exercise with maybe not a value engineer. You don't want to go that deep, but like an initial value exercise. Another idea might be like a very tailored demo where we've taken the problem we've agreed on and we're showing them a day in the life of solving that problem to see is the energy, is the belief there enough to carry us through into a decision or not.
I used to do some advisory work for a company that sold to procurement, funny enough, which is a miserable existence. And what they would do is they would basically scrape all of the software contracts for every software you've ever purchased. And they would show you, you've bought like 100 tools and here are all of your upcoming renewals. Here's how many seats you bought versus how many people you actually have. And what they would do to get to priority agreement is they would literally just like plug into someone's like Ramp or their inbox or their credit cards. And they would be like, great, here are the last like 30 renewals you missed.
Yeah.
And this is how much you could have saved if you just knew these renewals were coming. Now, that's just like a beefed up proof of concept. But the point of the proof of concept, which is what we are doing, is to get them to realize that this is a priority. So these are the places where you're basically taking the initial problem that you found in the demo or in the discovery, and you're putting numbers behind it. And there are a variety of tools you can use to do that in your sales cycle.
The buyer needs to realize that this is a priority. Your job is to guide them to that decision.
So let's go to evaluation agreement. So at this point, I agree that I have a problem. I agree that this problem's a priority and I know when I want to solve it. And now I need to agree on how to buy.
Most buyers have not bought the software that you sell, and they definitely don't buy it very regularly. So therefore, they do not have a construct with which to evaluate how to make a decision. So as a seller, if you don't help mandate what those buying criteria are, then you are kind of left up to the wind. You know how people say a lot of times, oh, I bought because I like the rep? I'm telling you, that's not because the rep was so magnetic that they got them to fork over money. It's because they didn't really have buying criteria. So they kind of fell back into, well, we trust Armand the most, so he's probably going to give us the most value and his product probably works the best. What you need to do is you need to answer the question, can we agree on how to evaluate this business decision? What are the buying criteria that you're going to use to pick one vendor over another? Or even more importantly, over doing nothing or the status quo, right? So we have to make sure that we define that with the buyer. 90% of the time, they will not define that on their own, which means that you're just kind of left to the emotional state of them, right? So what do we need to do that? What's the exit criteria that proves that we've answered that question? One is a mutual action plan. Do we have the steps that we're going to do to make sure that we get this implemented on time to get the value? That shows that we actually have some structure to the evaluation. And the second is, what are the required capabilities? What are the things that we must be able to do to solve this problem? If you don't have a list of those that they're using to evaluate all the other vendors against, you are kind of left up to their whims. And this is happening at an elevated level, usually at like a VP, a power level, because if they don't agree with the buying evaluation process, then they're not going to agree with the outcome that person that wants to buy it gives them.
So give me an example of what this would look like at outreach. So I have to get two types of exit criteria in a valuation agreement. Number one, how are you going to evaluate my solution? And then number two is more of like, how are you going to run a buying process internally in your organization? How are you going to conduct the evaluation? What would good sound like at outreach?
Good would sound like for a mutual action plan where we're getting them to agree to buying criteria would be a required capability of, we need our reps to make sure that they make at least 100 dials a day. We need to make sure that we can monitor our connect rates and our email to reply rates. These are generic statements, not specific to outreach. We wouldn't say, for example, well, we need to create a multi-step sequence that does this feature A and feature B. These are generic statements that any vendor can do, but what we need to start to show later in the sales process is how we do them better and how we do them in a differentiated way. But without that list, then the buyer might forget something, might leave something out, might include something that isn't going to help them make a good decision. So that's what good would look like, is a series of things that are needed in order for that company's SDRs or AEs to prospect in a better way.
So pro tip on this one, when you are getting required capabilities in the evaluation agreement stage, it is critical that those required capabilities are not a million technical feature requests, but instead they are outcomes or things you are helping a team do. So when I was selling compensation software at Pave, a technical capability would be like, I need to make sure that you integrate with all of these systems, or I need to make sure that you can ingest a complex compensation matrix and show bands on the left side and then market data on the right side. The outcome that they're looking for is, I need to make sure that I can run a fair compensation review and know exactly when an inequitable compensation decision is being made. And there are a million technical ways that I can accomplish that, but you're focused on helping them achieve the outcome, not just adhering to their feature requirements.
That's right. By putting technical things into the buying criteria, that's how you can get eliminated. Because if you don't meet those technical, almost preferential type of things versus, hey, this is a solution, let us show you how we solve it and why that approach is better. That's the kind of conversation you want to have, not a checkbox, can you integrate with Salesforce type of thing.
So if you're going into a deal review with one of your reps and they're like, I need to get a valuation agreement, I don't know their required capabilities and I don't know their process, what are some tools that I can use to get those things?
So some tools that you can use in order to help get agreement on how to evaluate would be, this is where you sit down with your champion and you and your champion work through the stuff that you prep them to go sell internally to get to agree, like, this is how I'm gonna do it. You know what's crazy what happens when you do that, Armand? Pro tip. is your champion looks better in their company when they come with a detailed way of how they're going to make an evaluation. Who do you think they're going to subscribe that like benefit inside their company to? The person that helped them create it. This is like one of those ninja ways that you can subtly like get your champions to really push for you, is because you make them look good inside their org by really helping them define their buying criteria, right? Another one might be executive meetings. This is where you would have your CEO talk to their CEO. You would prep your CEO with, hey, these are the things that we think that they should make the decision on, that they can then validate with that other executive. That's an amazing one. Those are two great tools in that section.
So at this point, I have problem agreement, priority agreement, and now I know how they are going to buy through evaluation agreement. And now it's a matter of just delivering that through value agreement. So walk me through this stage.
When we say that you're going to increase productivity by 23%, when we say that your connect rate is going to go from 5% up to 13%, most people are thinking bullshit. And so the value agreement is can we actually agree on the value that we're going to create or not? And if you can agree on what you're going to create, then you don't really have a deal. So the seminal question in this case is, do you agree that we can create the value that we're claiming we can create or not? And the exit criteria here is we actually get them to approve a proposal that we have put in front of their executives. That's when a buyer and your champion will put that proposal in front of their executives. That means that they've reached the agreement that, yes, I think that we can achieve this value. So this again happens, with kind of above the line people. We're still working that director space. This is also where you can come in with IT and finance. Those will usually be big people that will come in and kind of look. Like, I can't tell you how many deals I've had unravel because the IT person said, I don't think that can actually happen. So we need to make sure that we have that agreement there. The tools that you can use this is where that tailored, super detailed demo comes in, where it would only make sense maybe for this one company to do that demo. In bigger deals, that usually is a big way to make sure that you say, now that you completely understand how we work, do you believe that we can do this or not, right? Pilots and trials come back into play here, business cases and ROI studies. You just have to always be careful, because somebody receives something, because you give them an ROI study, because they say, hey, this looks great, doesn't mean that they actually agree with it. And that's where, again, we're moving from a meeting-based sales process where we'd have the proposal meeting. We did the proposal. Great, move to the next stage with negotiation. In a stage-based deal management process like this one, we don't move on until they've actually said, you know what, I do think that you can increase my pipeline coverage by 20%.
So if you think about how stage 3 and stage 4 talk to each other, stage 3 lays down the criteria. This is exactly what I need to see to move forward. Stage 4 gets the criteria done. It's like, all right, we're going to use this pilot to prove out that we can meet your required capabilities. And so as you go into your deal reviews with your reps, if you have a rep who's going into the value agreement stage, you need to make sure that whatever you are doing in the value agreement stage is directly for the purpose of checking off the evaluation criteria that you established in the previous stage.
I'll give you a great example of this value agreement. At Outreach, we were doing our single biggest initial land deal of all time. And we were dealing with a revenue operations buyer that was very technical, very smart, very put together. And we got to the point where we're like, this is what we can do. Here's your current workflow. Here's our workflow. We think we can deliver this for you. He literally said, bullshit, don't believe it. So what we did is we said, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to sit next to 3 of your SDRs and we're going to time how long it takes them to do certain things. And we sat there literally with a stopwatch and we'd be like, all right, now go find a contact. Oop, that took 37 seconds. Now go write the email. Oh, that took 12 minutes. And I'll go do this. This took 4 seconds, right? And then we took that workflow diagram, that process of how their SDR worked, and we're like, these are the current times that it takes your rep to do it. Then we put a rep and we trained them how to do outreach for 5 minutes. And then we're like, now do the same thing with outreach, with the RevOps guy looking at us the entire time. Stopwatch out, boom, boom, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Nothing took more than a minute, right? We literally were able to show him And he agreed because he saw it with his own eyes that the value we created was like a 73% decrease in the time it took to do normal tasks that an SDR did. That's when the deal happened. That moment that he saw that, he agreed with the value. He went from a buyer to a champion that was pushing for us because he felt like it was going to help the business.
And notice that Mark had clearly laid out what outcome he wanted for his SDRs and then designed a test to prove out that we could achieve that outcome. And the number one deal killer that I see with reps who have pilots or POCs in their sales cycle is they'll be going into a trial or a pilot or something like that. And I'll be like, what makes this pilot a hell yes at the end of this? And they'll look at me and they're like, well, they said they just wanted to like give it a try or see if they liked it. And I'm like, got it. So we're going to go into this trial and we're going to hope that by the end of this trial that they liked it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's like, no, going into a trial, going into value agreement, you need to know exactly what you need to prove to them and make that controllable. Otherwise, you are literally just guessing and hoping that they like your product when you go into a trial. The final step is commercial agreement, which is, are you going to buy this thing? Is it worth the price?
We've agreed on a problem. We've said it's a priority. This is how we've evaluated it. That's gone great. We've agreed that you actually believe the value that we can create from that buying process, right? And now we get to this value that I've agreed on. What is it actually worth? And that's the seminal question. Can we agree on a price that you'll pay for this value that we've agreed I can deliver? And the exit criteria here is like, all right, have they put us through and have we passed procurement and security? This honestly is like as simple as, did they sign the contract, right? That means that they agreed to it, right? We can also like make sure that we are passing notes to post sales in this place to make sure that they understand like, hey, this is how we're going to actually deliver the value, right? Those are important aspects of this commercial agreement.
So the people that are doing this are obviously the folks who are above the line, who are signing the contract, and then legal, who's processing the paperwork, probably procurement's involved in the financial approval. The tools are really interesting. So I can use things like a proposal to get commercial agreement. I can bring in post-sales people to talk about implementation process. A common mistake that I see is a seller will be like, I gave them the price. I gave them a proposal. Does that mean that I'm in the commercial agreement stage?
Yeah, no, that does not mean that. You might give the proposal at any place in this process. You can do it whenever you want to. Again, we don't have a proposal stage where we give the proposal. We give the proposal when we're ready because we have the agreements in place that allow us to create a compelling proposal. And that's the difference is when we get to a meeting that says proposal, we take whatever we got and we make the proposal up, whether we're missing pieces or not. We have a stage-based sales process like this. We get the agreements and we slide into the proposal because it's the inevitable next step based on all the other agreements that we've made so far. So yeah, you can do the proposal whenever you want to.
Yeah, so folks, when I was selling SMB at Carta, you would see all of these reps pop a deal from stage 1 to stage 4.
Stage 1 to stage 1?
It would literally for stage 1 to close 1. And the problem is people would be like, oh, I gave him pricing on the first call. That means we're in the proposal and negotiation stage. And I was like, no, it doesn't. Just because you gave pricing doesn't mean that you've gotten commercial agreement. Keep in mind, you can't have commercial agreement until someone has agreed that this is a problem worth paying for. It's a priority. It's valuable. Just because you gave them price does not mean that they're agreeing to price, okay? So in your mind, again, what you're doing, the meeting that you're doing might be a proposal meeting, but you need to think, what is the decision or the agreement your prospect is making? Just because you gave them price does not mean that they agreed on the commercial terms yet.
Yeah, another great example, I'm in priority agreement. A tool I might use could be a proposal. What if I float them a $400,000 proposal? Are they like, whoa? Not happening. And immediately I can see, oh, the priority may not be here. But in the problem statement, I found out this is a $5 million problem. So why would they not pay $400K for a $5 million problem? It's pretty simple. It's because they don't think it's a priority. And so therefore we can use the proposal to test for that priority early on in the process, but we don't have to wait till the proposal meeting to do it. It's just another tool. What we want are those agreements, and whatever tools you want to make to get the agreements, that's fair game.
So folks, we're gonna walk through how you can like condense your sales cycle into one call. versus when you might actually need to cover multiple calls per stage, and this might actually drag out in a bigger sales cycle. So give me an example of like how I might condense this sales cycle into one call.
At Outreach, we had an SMB segment that actually had a sub-segment called micro, and that was for employee sizes of 35 people and under. And that business we couldn't outbound to because it didn't make economic sense. And we had to get the deal cycle times super tight in order for a rep to close enough deal for this segment to make economic sense. So what we did is we created one call close situation where we got all 5 agreements. The way that we did that is we did 10, 10, 10. 10 minutes of discovery, and that discovery would be not just problem agreement, but the priority agreement. Then we would move into 10 minutes of demo. The demo point was to say, do you actually believe this enough to create evaluation criteria that you can go back and look at? Do you actually believe the value that we can create? Did all that in 10 minutes. And then the last 10 minutes was negotiations where we would work on the commercial agreement. So we literally did 2 in the first 10 minutes, 2 stages in the second 10 minutes, 1 stage in the last 10 minutes. They got an MSA, and then we would follow up with them after that. Maybe have a second meeting. Maybe in 25% of the deals, we had a second meeting. Everything else it closed in 10 minutes, but we could do that because that's what the business required. But that's how we shrunk that down into 1 meeting.
Now give me an example of where I might have to slow things down and have multiple calls per stage.
So let's move up to SMB. Now 35 to 250 people, right? We go from 7K deals that are done in 7 days to now 15K deals that are done in about 30 days, all right? And so in this, now what we've done is we created what we call the 5 decks, right? And each deck was how do you present in order to get the agreement? So we had a discovery deck that was meant to get the problem agreement. We had a demo deck that was meant to get the priority agreement. We had a negotiations deck that was meant to get the commercial agreement. So we had 5 decks. We called it the 5 decks. It was literally said, when we hired somebody like little grasshopper, if you learn the 5 decks, you will be a sales master. Yes. And we literally did that, and people ran to master the 5 decks. That wasn't 5 meetings. You could put 2 decks into 1 meeting. You could put 5 decks into 1 meeting if you wanted to. You could do 1 deck over 3 meetings. But the idea is we gave you the tool to accomplish the agreement.
And give me an example of if I was doing enterprise sales. Don't go through each stage, but pick 1 stage. And like how many calls might I spend in 1 stage in an enterprise sale?
You might do multiple calls, but I think the bigger concept inside of the enterprise sale is that it's nonlinear. So you're going to start with a buyer group, and then once you get past them, they're going to expand you to a bigger buyer group or a buying committee. Then you might have to start back all over and run it again. Then you're going to get to the executive level if it's a big deal, and you're going to have to start it over and do it again, right? So it's much more about, like, in this case, who are you meeting with and have you gotten the agreements required to help them move forward? It's okay when somebody new gets added to a deal for you to go back and get those same agreements again. Just because the people you've met with have given you those agreements doesn't mean you have gathered all the agreements that you get with all the people that you need in order to do a super complex enterprise deal.
It's sort of like if you've ever played Super Mario World, where like Mario goes through each of the different worlds, and at the end he beats like one version of Bowser's castle, and then like they start him over, and it's like, all right, you're in world 2, and then at the end it's another Bowser's castle, and then like all of the Bowser's castles roll up into like one big fight with Bowser at the end. That's basically what enterprise sales is you're getting problem agreement, priority agreement, evaluation agreement, value agreement, and then commercial agreement in one part of the business, and then you probably go to like the next part of the business, and then like eventually you get like all the train tracks to sort of like meet each other at the final train station together.
Yeah. This gives you a foundation to build a project plan from. And really, enterprise sales, I found, is much more about project management than it is about actual selling. A lot of the enterprise people have smart people that know what they're doing, that are trained to do something very specific and is very specialized. And so what we need to do is we need to help them manage this project because they're usually super busy and things fall to the wayside. This gives you an ability to say, listen, who do we need to get an agreement with the problem? All right, you need to get this person, this person, this person. All right, I'm going to call them all. I'm going to get my SDR to get this person. We'll get this all taken care of. Now, see, now you're managing a project using the sales process, not saying, oh, I did a discovery meeting with Beth, and now I get to go do a demo with Beth, when Beth has no power to make any decision whatsoever.
So folks, now you know how to run a sales process based on stages, not meetings. We went through the 5 sales stages, and down below, you're actually going to see a link to a template where you can build your own sales stages. So that's your homework for this module. Make sure that you go take that spreadsheet template, build out your 5-stage sales process. And again, it is okay if you have a sales process at your company already, you can still take the principles of this process. Even if you have a meeting-based sales process today, you can still ask yourself, what am I trying to get out of these meetings? And you will still have a massive improvement above a traditional meeting-based sales process. So you don't have to throw your whole process away, but what you do need to think about are what are the things that I need to get from my prospect to get a deal closed in my organization.
Yep. Big pro tip here is if you create your own sales process that is absent or doesn't take into account or is completely separate than your company's, no matter what you do, it's not going to be good. All right. What we're encouraging you to do is to take these 5 agreements, find how you can weave them into your current sales process and use these concepts to make sure that your reps are actually doing it and thinking correctly about how to move a deal through the pipeline.